You're listening to the 2017 Nelson Arts Festival Page and Blackmore Readers and Writers Programme. This is a panel session featuring Rebekah White, Emily Wrights, Laura Irish and Michelanne Forster in discussion with Lucinda Blackley-Jimson.
Thank you indeed for coming. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to what I'm sure is going to be an extremely lively and engaging session. And my gosh, what a year. We are going to have so much to talk about in just 1 hour. So just a couple of notes before we get started. I want to thank you to Page and Blackmore, Nelson Readers and Writers Festival, and thanks to the Arts Festival for making this happen and inviting us here. Just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded and it's going to be available as a podcast on iTunes. And you can find it under Page and Blackmore, Nelson Readers and Writers. Feel free to use the Twitter hashtag NelsonArtsFest to live tweet about this conversation, keep it going, get it started in the digital sphere, but just a reminder to have your phones on silent, thanks. And it's a really great pleasure to introduce our panellists. First over here we have Rebekah White. Rebekah is a journalist and editor based in Auckland. She started out writing science fiction and now writes science fact. Currently, she's the editor of New Zealand Geographic magazine, where she produces features about wildlife, technology, culture and environment. At the beginning of 2017, she became the first woman to edit the magazine in its 28-year history. Welcome. And next on my right is Emily Wrights. Is a mother of two, author of best-selling book Rants in the Dark, From One Tired Mama to Another. She is an activist, volunteer and feminist. Welcome. Yeah. On my left, Laura Irish is an actress, playwright and the director of Ghostlight Theatre and the Nelson Fringe Festival. She is originally an American, a 10-year Nelsonian and a mother of two. Welcome. And finally, on my far left, Michelanne Forster, who came to New Zealand in 1973. She knows she still has an accent. Thank you for telling her. She loves hearing this from every new person she meets. She's a playwright, 18 plays, all produced in New Zealand and overseas, an author and a teacher, 7 books, New Zealand Broadcasting School, CPIT, Uni of Auckland Continuing Education. She would be very happy to renounce the American part of her dual citizenship, only it costs $2,500, which is too much even when you loathe Trump. She says after 43 years here, she considers herself a Kiwi, and being married to a man from Palmerston North offers tangible evidence of this. So we welcome our panel. So let's start with going back to that fateful day just around a year ago. I remember very clearly that day. I went to work in my sympathetic pantsuit, my sympathetic Hillary pantsuit I was channeling, and the news came through on social media that the election was going another way. And I certainly found myself sinking in my seat. Dragged myself to the supermarket after work in my misery, going for the cheapest bottle of Chardonnay I could find. And thinking, what happened, America? What were you thinking? And can I throw that question to our two Americans? Not that we're blaming you or holding you responsible at all.
You start,
First
Laura.
of all, I just want to apologize. Also, I think I'm at the wrong talk. I thought we were women in the age of Jacinda. So,
Yeah. The red shirt.
No, that day was a really hard day. I know for me personally, we had a lot of people who came over to watch the election at my house, and friends in Nelson that are American and that are not American, because everyone seems to be really invested in this. And as things started to unfold and hope started fading away, yeah, it was quite a
Gut
wake-up
wrench.
call, a gut wrench. Yeah.
A shock.
Yes. But I think the biggest thing for me was, and I said I wouldn't embarrass my son. He said it was okay to tell this story. But after it happened, walking into the hallway and just feeling this bit of shock and him coming up to me and hugging me and saying, "I'm so sorry, Mom." Just broke my heart. So it was a hard day for us.
It was a hard day, I think, because certainly as an American, I was brought up to revere American presidents. I remember going to the school library, and there was a big stack of books with blue spines, and we were learning about George Washington, who never told a lie, Honest Abe, who freed the slaves, and so on. And I asked Laura if she remembered growing up this way too, with this kind of reverence for the president, and in fact, we do remember it. This is what we remember being taught. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And
It's a load of crap.
and it's very heartbreaking to know that is a load of crap. And and I was feeling sorry for the young people now. And when Laura was talking about her children and others, and you know, what are kids hearing today? We're hearing that there's a clown made of mummified foreskin and cotton candy ruling our country. There's a mentally ill chauvinist ignoramus. There's a walking scrotum sprinkled with cheese dust. A racist, a narcissist, a pathological and compulsive liar. So it's very hard, and I'm ashamed. I'm going to turn it over to somebody who's a bit more positive right now.
And to the New Zealanders on this
I feel so sad for you because, I mean, I have to be honest, the election, I just didn't... I had a baby that, like, never slept, and I just didn't care. Like, I was just like, get my baby to sleep. And I was like, Hillary Clinton will win. I don't care what happens in the States. I just want my baby to go the F to sleep. And then suddenly my husband was like, oh, did you know that Donald Trump got in? And I was like, don't be ridiculous. And then it was, and I just was just so shocked. I thought it was my severe sleep deprivation had made me go insane. But yeah, I really thought straight away of young people, and I thought about our most vulnerable young people. I thought about our LGBTQI youth. I thought about our trans kids, and I just thought, gosh, what message are we sending all these young kids that their home isn't their home anymore, and that the person who, I knew then that he would embolden people with their racism and their homophobia and their transphobia, and that really worried me.
Yes, certainly when he campaigned, it was lock her up, lock her up.
Yeah, that I was just really shocked, but I was very much in my parenting bubble, and it's been ever since that I've become, because I thought he'd be impeached by now. I really thought he would only last a couple of days. Like I'm amazed that
I mean, they've got him for sexual assault on tape, and yet that doesn't seem to count for anything.
Yeah. And I was, and I had because I used to be a journalist, I had this big, just this immense sort of pain around the fake news stuff, that this, the fact that I was just so naive, and I grew up, you just don't lie to the public and journalists and all that. Like I just was really, how is this possible? How is this possible?
But it is.
Yeah, and that I was really disappointed in the media, and that was hard to reconcile as well. But the whole time I had a lot of friends who were writing to me who were women of colour, and that in the States who were just, I felt for them so much, and I really felt like my concerns as a New Zealander here did not rate compared to what it's like being there for those people who are most at risk, and my friends who are trans who were straight away trying to get as much medication as they could now, knowing that it could be closed off, that their health care was at risk, those friends with chronic illnesses, and that really brought it home to me and made me feel very ashamed at how I had been in a little bubble, and made me think, gosh, we have to act from here as well.
You can tell we're a bunch of women. We all feel guilty that Trump got elected.
I don't have a lot to add to that, but I think it was striking in the sense that it wasn't a matter of someone gaining power whose policy I disagreed with, but the sense that in a day the world became a more dangerous place for a whole lot of people, not only in the States, and not only because of policy decisions that would happen, but in terms of enabling racism and sexism and transphobia and homophobia. It was just overnight those things became suddenly more legitimate than they were the day before.
Yeah, there's so much feeling and so many things in what you've all said there. Just want to start picking up on a couple of issues that have been raised. The Access Hollywood tape that came out before the election when Trump was on record saying that he groped women. And
I thought he was finished then.
Yeah, same. We all did.
Yeah.
And yet America elected him. The groper-in-chief, as someone once described him. But there he is, and sitting in power, elected, legitimising that. But then we've had the Harvey Weinstein events, and I just want to see what the panel's response is to what has been happening lately.
Well, that's rape culture, isn't it? In my view, rape culture is a legitimate concept, and this is what we're living in as women, and I think that it's what we always have been living in as women. The hashtag Me Too, which I don't know whether everybody's familiar with, but after Harvey Weinstein, women writing Me Too if they've ever been sexually harassed and sexually assaulted. And I kind of had this response to it where I was like, I'm actually quite angry about this Me Too hashtag, because you don't need all of us to tell you this is happening. We've been telling you for years that this is happening. You know, how many of us does it happen to? Because if it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. So you don't need every woman in this room to put their hand up and lay their souls bare for you to suddenly give a shit.
There's plenty of social science around it. Why do we have to offer anecdotal proof in order for you to believe that that is happening? I also was rubbed up the wrong way by the Me Too hashtag, but also it seems as though for some reason, there are all these women who have experienced sexual harassment, and yet there's no men willing to stand up and be like, oh yeah, I've had those.
I did that.
Yeah, where are they? Apparently there's one guy running around harassing everybody because nobody's willing to admit to maybe having some views that weren't great and maybe changing them.
And the very uncomfortable truth is if almost every woman you know has been sexually harassed or sexually abused in some way, then look at the men around you. Sorry.
I got to defend my sons. I have 4 sons. Come on, they're
they're
good guys.
I have 2 sons as well, and that's why I'm, the fact is we can sit in this truth around sexual abuse and sexual assault without saying that we're attacking men. We're not attacking men. And this all men, not all men, it doesn't matter. We're not saying all men. I'm not coming up to you, knocking on your door and being like, excuse me. I'm saying that we need to look around and say, how are we going to address this? Because I have 2 boys and I don't want them growing up to be hurt, but I also don't want them growing up to hurt others. That is an equal plane for me, where I don't want them hurting other people and I don't want them being hurt. And I think we focus so much on our daughters by saying to them as soon as they're old enough, be careful what you wear, don't go out in certain ways, protect yourself, do all of these things so you don't get raped. We need to be teaching don't rape.
So with a role model like Trump in the White House,
Makes it very difficult.
How do we grow our boys up with good role models?
I don't know. If I knew, I would have millions of dollars. It's so hard. We just have to be modeling the behavior that we want to see in our children, and we have to be surrounding ourselves with people and calling it out when we see it. You know, if somebody, I mean, this is my personal opinion, but if somebody makes a sexist joke, I will say, hey, did you know that's a bit misogynistic? You know, like, oftentimes we'll sit by and go, that made me feel uncomfortable, but I'm not going to say it. Why not? Why are we not saying it? Because
We're conditioned to keep the peace.
Yeah. But I don't want to do that anymore. Yeah.
It's so hard when I think of Trump, you know, standing there on the stage accepting the presidency, and he was surrounded by a bevy of Barbie dolls. And they were all wearing stiletto heels the size of ice picks. And they all had those sort of skinny little sheathy dresses on. And they were all smiling with their kind of Botoxy lips. And I don't know, it just set me right back to a really sad place in my life. I mean, I'm the oldest one here. I remember turning into a feminist. I remember the freedom of, in the 1970s, going to Auckland University and discovering, you know, that there was such a thing as feminism. My mom was a very traditional mother in the 1950s. You know, she did what my dad said. He wore the boots in the family. She had a high school education and nothing more. And of course, when they got divorced, she was at the bottom of the heap. So, yeah, I just felt like a sort of giant tidal wave or maybe a mudslide has taken me right back to those very early days when feminism was just raising its little head and trying to find a voice. And here I am again. I'm having to hold the sign up. I'm over 60, and look what we've got. What happened?
I think that is something that a lot of people are confronting. There are a lot of issues, civil rights issues that we thought were over, civil rights issues that came up in the 60s about basic rights for women, rights for people of colour. And you look at what's happening in America and things seem to be eroded. And the US hasn't been able to pass an ERA law since, 1923?
And they're like undoing Planned Parenthood. You know, there's a lot of taking away happening right now in the States for women. And it's just very discouraging.
I think, like, with this whole situation, there's something that every person wants. And it's opportunity and rights. But it's that some people are willing to sacrifice the opportunity of others to gain the opportunities themselves. And I think that's what we're looking at with the people that voted for Trump. They're people that feel disenfranchised, but they're willing to put down others in order to get the opportunities that they don't feel they have. And while that's not fair, sometimes people can't see the whole picture.
Yeah. If you were talking to us before about your family and you had some big Trump supporters in your family, what was that like for you?
It was horrible. My sister is part of the LGBTQI community. And when my father and stepmother voted for Trump, that was very hard for her. And she's only 22 years old. And it was difficult for her and me because I went to bat for her to them. It was difficult for us to explain to them that what they were doing would impact her. Because they were just thinking about, you know, I mean, they grew up in a time where you didn't tell people who you voted for. That was your own personal business, and you did it for your own personal political reasons. But now, and I feel like it always has been, but now even more so, there's a fine line between politics and morality. And we have to decide which side of that line we are on, and whether or not we are willing to take rights away from other people just so we feel like we are fulfilling some sort of political agenda. And so when my parents, well, don't say my parents, my mother, for the first time since she was able to vote, voted Democrat. Wow. And she called me and said, I would never usually tell people who I voted for, but I want everyone to know that I voted for Hillary for my grandchildren. But my dad didn't see the connect because he has always voted Republican, and that is what he would vote. So after the election, we didn't speak because I didn't know, it's hard to see people that you respect and love and then wonder, this sounds extreme, but wonder, are they good people? Or is it just that this is what I've always known? And I don't think my father is a bad person. I think in this case in general and in a lot of cases, I think he made a stupid decision.
Are your parents from the middle of the United States?
Yeah.
So some of you who might not would like a little tiny little American history lesson. The West Coast and the East Coast are the liberal coasts, and the middle of the states is conservative and closed off. And the immigrants came in from the East and the West and from the coast, but the middle has its own kind of conservative nature. They're highly religious. That would be right, Laura, wouldn't it? And so there's almost two United States, really. And my family's from California, so I had a completely different experience than you. This is election night. I'm Skyping with my parents. My mother is well into the liquor, and she's saying, the glass ceiling is going to be broken. Tonight we are watching, and there's my brother saying, no, Mom, sorry, she's lost Ohio. No, the glass ceiling. I see the glass ceiling. No, Mom, Florida has gone, and so on and so on. So, yeah, it was played out all around the country, these weird family dynamics of family. It's a bit like the American Civil War, really. I mean, I don't know that you've ever had. Do you have this in New Zealand, where you're feeling this agitated, really, about, say, the current election that you just had? Where family members are actually standing opposite each other, opposite a divide, and feeling like they can't understand each other? Is it?
So I edit a magazine called New Zealand Geographic, and I write a lot of stories about climate change or produce them. And my father doesn't believe that climate change exists. And
mine too.
But I found it really. I'm still puzzling my way through this. In the case of my dad, there was almost a mind block in the sense that when we were talking about the American election, he was talking about how, it was, if he could have voted, he's a New Zealander, so I don't know. Anyway, this was a thought experiment that he did. But he was talking about how it would have been the moral imperative for him to vote for one of the extra candidates. I don't know what you call them, the independent candidates, not Hillary or Trump, because he didn't like either of them. And I was trying to explain to him, actually, in this instance, I think in terms of your moral obligation would be to vote for Hillary, because this man is so amoral and would make the world so much a worse place for so many people that you kind of have to set policy aside. And I couldn't make him understand how much of an impact Trump was going to have. And he couldn't deal with the idea of voting for Hillary, this woman that he really hated, in order to protect these huge sectors of society. I don't know if you guys have found a way through that. I never have.
I have my father, bless him, has spent his whole life trying to manage me. And he's like, early on, he was very, like, he's a journalist and has taught me to question everything, which in turn has infuriated him the older that I get. And so, he would constantly be like, Emily, why are you so angry? And I would be like, Dad, you should be angry as well. Like, look at what's going, And we have had periods where it's been like, oh, because I've been talking at him like, come on, Dad, can't you see what I can see? And it would, we had really some fraught times, but I was lucky that because he was a journalist, it was this idea that you should question everything and you should really, to take a position, and you have to have a lot behind it. And but this election, he said to me, I'm going to vote Greens. And I was like, what? Dad. And I was so why? Why'd you, And he was like, he said, because I've started to think about voting for you and my grandchildren, and it was this really, he ended up voting Labour, but, I'm fine with that, any side this, but, that was, that meant a huge, it meant so much to me, because there's this idea, I think, particularly with how we talk about politics, that you have to do it in this there's this New Zealand way, I think, of not talking about politics over dinner, or it's not polite to talk about politics. And I've been lucky that I wasn't raised that way. And even though it's infuriated my parents, I'm also really glad that they have given that to me, that this idea that anger can be a gift and it can make change, because we have this idea of let's very gently talk about these rights being eroded, or what's happening with our children growing up, or the education system, or the rights of queer kids and stuff like that, when we don't know what sexuality our children will be. And I think that actually getting angry is going to help, because when I have so many people say to me, I'm angry, and I'm like, hold that, harness it, and let's do something with it, because complacency is part of what's got us here. This idea that we went, okay, well, things have got a bit better, we can vote, we've got a bank account, woohoo. But, this marriage equality in New Zealand and things like that, so we can go, we're getting heaps better, but you look at the plebiscite in Australia, and I think we have to really say it's okay. Not only is it okay to get angry, but it's really good to get angry. And sometimes when people say things to you that make you feel deeply uncomfortable, hold that feeling and go, why do I feel this way? And unpack it, because that's what I've had many times when people have come to me, and I guess people call it calling out online or something like that, where they say, oh, Emily, have you thought about the way that you're viewing this through the lens of privilege that you have as a Pākehā woman, or, any of those things? And it makes me go, oh, no, I'm good. I'm on the good side, But when I stop and really unpack that and think, why am I feeling the way that I do? That uncomfortableness, that anger is what drives me in my activism. And I think that I'm tired of angry being considered a bad thing, when you should be absolutely outraged at some of the stuff that's going on.
After Trump was elected, we saw a lot of anger coming out in the Women's March with the posse hats and the "we shall not be grabbed" motives. And then we saw the scientists coming out as well, who are fighting for the continuation of funding for science, and arguing that, yes, actually there is a scientific truth that climate change is real and it is happening. As a science writer, Rebekah, how do you respond to that denial that we have in the White House now?
With anger and with advocacy, I was just on the subject of the Women's March. I got a little bit frustrated by it, because it was nice to have that moment of solidarity, but it also seemed to, in some ways, replace direct action that could have been taken. And there are a lot of things in New Zealand that, if you're angry about, you could advocate for. We don't have paid paternity leave. Our abortion law really needs reforming. It's still in the Crimes Act. We could advocate for better availability of contraceptives instead of having to go to the doctor. We could prescribe them through pharmacies. That's something direct. The domestic purposes benefit isn't enough to live on if you have kids, and it's normally women who receive those. Those are very concrete things that we can take to our elected representatives. But I did not see that happening in the wake of the women's marches. It seemed to be, I'm just having a moment of cynicism here, to be a feel-good moment of let's all get together that did not result in any kind of direct advocacy. Maybe you have a different view.
I don't.
I don't either.
I'm going to put in the long view here just to be slightly, depressing.
I can't wait.
Yeah, this is really good. I was thinking, I've gone through the 5 stages of grief with Trump. Am I on the microphone? I can never tell whether I am or
you
not.
are.
Okay, sorry. So, first you start off with denial. It cannot be happening. It cannot be happening. Then anger. And I'm right with you there. Then you move on to bargaining, and that bargaining in my mind was, well, look, he can't actually be the idiot that he seems to be, so let's just give him a few months to kind of get it together, and we'll make a bargain that way. Well, that hasn't worked. Then that sort of segues into depression, which is the stage that I'm at now, and possibly we'll move on to acceptance, but I don't think so. So
Never.
So when I started to think about this, I started to think, okay, am I going to put on my loincloth, so to speak, and go up to the highest mountain and hide away for the next 3 years? Because I've been through this all. I just don't have the energy to cope. I'm trumped out and discouraged. So I thought, to cheer myself up, I'm going to look at bad guys in history just to see how sort of Trump rates. And that made me feel a tiny bit better. For example, Caligula was a Roman emperor. He was famous for making his horse a senator. And he decapitated and strangled children for fun, and he chewed up the testicles of his victims. So, look,
Could be worse.
Things could be worse. It kind of amused me for half an hour. Genghis Khan killed between 20 million and 60 million people. If you get me on my Jewish shtick, I could really depress myself and you. So maybe a long view for those of us who've been through the first wave of feminism, to think, he's 70 years old. He can't last forever. He's going to die. The old white men who got such a stranglehold on American politics, their time is almost over. It's the kind of last gasp of power. That's what I like to think. So I ran this theory in front of my 96-year-old father, a refugee from Hitler, and he said, I don't know about that. He said, there's plenty more where he came from.
I like to think, though, that the general trajectory is trending upwards. I remember that, when my mother was born, women were not allowed to competitively run marathons because their uteruses might have fallen out along the way. I don't know. That's a really recent. Women couldn't get credit cards until the mid-1970s. And even now, the type of conversation that's happening around sexual harassment hasn't happened to this extent within my lifetime, or within my memory. So I feel that if you do take a view even of the last 30 years, the changes for women and for minorities and for gay people have been really dramatic, but there's still so much to go.
Do you think there's a risk that we're going backwards, that there was this huge wave of hope and things were going forwards, and we had gay marriage in the States and legislation, and things are just starting to be rolled backwards? Do you think there's still...
I think there's a
going
backlash,
forward?
but I think that will win it. I think that it's people who aren't comfortable with it having a huge moment of freaking out, but they're not going to succeed at that.
Especially since Lucinda is there to help us.
I kind of take the view that if you are a 15-year-old kid who is not sure about your gender, who is not sure about your sexuality, who has parents who are not accepting, who feels desperately alone, and then goes online and sees, transphobia and literally laws being created that are going to make them a lesser person. I think that the discussion about whether we're going backwards or forwards doesn't matter. The discussion for them is, can I keep living in this world? And my children are 2 and 5, and my 5-year-old wakes up in the morning each day and he decides, what am I going to wear today? It might be a tutu with a colander on my head, and he is so free. And I have this little window where I'm like, this is where all of my energies go, is that every child should be able to wake up in the morning knowing that they're safe that day, that they're loved, that whatever happens, there are people all around them, whether it's their parents or not, but there are all these adults working our asses off to make it a better world for them. And that's what my focus is, that I look at my kids and say, I made a promise to you, not just that, when you were born, that I'm always going to love you, but I'm going to make this world better for you. And I might just be one person, but I know out of the work that I do that I'm not just one person, because the women are the backbone of the voluntary sector. Women are the backbone of the social justice movement, of feminism, and we are all working there, whether we're going backwards or forwards. I don't know many women going, oh, well, can't do it. We'll just go have some tea, We have always fought and we will continue to fight.
I really admire that.
Can I also point out that if you look at a time use survey in New Zealand, retired women somehow manage to do twice the volunteer work of retired men. There's no one's tried to theorise around this, but surely you have the same amount of time, right?
And also I do want to say around, women who are retired, and these are grandmothers, and I meet so many grandmothers who are helping their children raise their children, who are doing incredible things. The foster care, if you have seen foster care in New Zealand, it is elderly women and elderly men who are taking in these children and giving them love and showing them that they are valued and important and loved. And these are the women who inspire me every single day. These women who I look at and think, oh, I thank you for not only paving a way for me, but showing all that I can achieve and what I can be as a mother as well, because I look at them and I think, gosh, you never stopped. Thank you for never stopping.
I think that's, it's hard to articulate things sometimes. All the words, all the good words. I think the thing that makes me have hope is that I feel that we live in an age where truth and connection are valued. And that is what is going to get us past this. There was, a generation before. I mean, we parent differently than our parents parented us. And, I remember my mother talking about her parents and, how there's this invisible line between what was discussed with her, between her and her parents. And that I feel like it's breaking down, and I feel like the connections are what is going to get us through this next stage, to break these barriers, being more aware that our children are individuals, that they, to give them that freedom to be whoever they want to be, is more possible now than it has ever been.
I was recently at a march at Parliament that was organised by a 13-year-old girl, and she stood up and did the most incredible speech I've ever seen in my life. I was in tears, and, these young people that I meet, I'm just like, oh my gosh, thank God, you are incredible. And, I think that our focus on the rights of children and how amazing teenagers are today and their immense compassion and empathy for each other and for the world. I have yet to meet a teenager who I haven't gone, wow, you're amazing. And that helps me so much, but right down to our appreciation of children no matter what age. little boy who's 5 inspires me so much. Like, he sees a problem, and I mean, he was very sick when he was born, spent a huge amount of time in hospital, and we almost lost him. And for his 4th birthday, I said, what do you want to do for your birthday? And he said, I want to raise money for the children's hospital because somebody did that for me. And he raised $7,000 in one day, mainly because he harassed people by going up to them and going, do you have any money? I know you have some money. But, you know, and like that hope that he has, and, you know, this idea that they just look at things and go, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And I think that we all have periods in our lives, whether we're activists or volunteers or anything, where we just feel very, like Michelanne said, just depressed and just, how do I keep going? And this is the sense of community and activism, that there's somebody else who goes, it's okay, I'll step up now, and when you're ready, we're going to do this together.
That word hope has come out quite a few times in what we've just been talking about recently, and I know I feel a lot more hopeful this week than I did last week, and there's been something that's changed there. In New Zealand, we have got a new woman leader who is really committed to doing things about child poverty, who's committed to the environment. What's the panel's reaction? Do we have hope?
I think it's really a transformative moment to have a woman in charge and to be able to address some of the extreme discomfort that people do still have with women in charge, and that's going to come to the forefront now, and we'll be able to address it.
Yeah, because she will address it.
She definitely
When it comes
will.
up, she will address it, and I can't wait.
Yeah,
be
I
awesome.
mean, I think Jacinda is incredible, and I mean, I've met her quite a few times, and she's a genuine, lovely, kind person. But I think that my same view is, no matter what the government, we are not complacent, and we hold them to account. It doesn't, to me. I've seen governments that I had a lot of hope for not deliver, and I've seen agreements made that I'm not comfortable with. And and I think that actually it will come out that there have been agreements that I don't agree with, and we will each have that in various ways. But I think that the key is to hold people to account, and to do that role of saying, you said you would do this, now you're going to do it, and saying that. You know, I think Jacinda's going to have a really tough job, but I really believe that if anybody can do it, she can.
Okay, we're moving towards question time already, so I just wonder if we can get some final thoughts from each of our panellists. Michelanne.
Yeah, I sorry. I remember hearing her give that speech, and it was, quite an emotional moment for me. Final thoughts from me. I guess my challenge for anybody who would want to take it up is to connect with as many people as possible. Don't close off connections with people because they don't share your views. We have to find our people, and we have to believe in the good in the world because, I see my children and, I don't know how many of you went to That Bloody Woman, but but I went to see it, and then I went straight home and booked the very final ticket so that my 10-year-old son could go see it. There he is. And he came home from it and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm a feminist." So let's just keep doing good things.
Oh, so hard to follow. I would say just a thank you to everybody who volunteers, who fights, who advocates for others, who stands up for children, who stands up for minority groups. And I want us all to hold space in our hearts for those people, because it's a really hard job to be angry and stay angry and do something when you feel like you're not achieving anything. Sometimes it does feel like that. And I just want to say thank you to all those people who do that, and all those people who support people to do that, and the parents who raise their children to be fiery, angry feminists.
I think that I'd just like to remind everybody that you have a lot of power as a consumer and as an individual, and we're still surrounded by stories and narratives that are damaging and dangerous. And you're allowed to do things like point out that all of the villains in James Bond films are always people from different ethnic minorities. And you're allowed to point out that certain leading actors' romantic counterparts stay the same age while that person keeps getting older. You are allowed to point out that people in films all conform to that feminine ideal that you described seeing on the stage at Trump's inauguration. You are allowed to complain about Leighton Smith calling Jacinda Ardern a chickie babe on the radio. That stuff isn't political correctness. That is an injustice that you are able to point out and that you can help to correct by advocating for the stories that you want to see in the world and ignoring the ones that you don't.
Thank you, everyone. This is such a huge topic, and there is so much more to say. But it's time to open the floor to questions. We don't have a microphone, but yell it out, and I'll repeat it back to the audience.
My question is, I suppose, half question, half statement, because I've come out of this talk thinking it's not just women in the age of Trump, it's parents in the age of Trump. And if Trump has enabled, or the American administration in its current form, has enabled people to feel it's okay to be racist, to be misogynist, all these things, then I'm coming out of this thinking, what can we do as parents that's more? Don't be complacent, be angry. And don't let the status quo continue. My son regularly uses the term thought. Who knows what thought means? Anyone? So this is a regular teenage banter term, and it stands for that hoe over there. And it's used to describe any girl who's behaving in a way that's sexually active or attractive. And it basically labels that girl as something less because she's doing these behaviours. Now, I call that behaviour out as much as I can, and I'll carry on doing it, and I'll do it more. And I just find out a challenge to all of us as parents who have grown children. We have to do this. We have to have these honest conversations in order to grow a generation who are going to think for themselves and hopefully help us all go in the direction we should all be going. Sorry, thank you.
Kia ora. Anyone like to pick up on that? There was a lot there.
It's basically what Emily's been saying.
Yeah. Around our challenge going forward as parents.
I mean, I think that I agree that as Trump has emboldened racists and sexist and transphobic, like misogynists, he's just a lightning bolt for terrible people, and he's made them all believe that it's okay to say, like, I remember when you used to just be ashamed about being a racist, and now it's just like, it's fine. And you know, this idea that parents have a huge role to play, and it should embolden parents as well to parent in a way that raises their children to not be all of the things that Trump is. And I feel incredibly lucky that my writing, my community is with parents. And I would say that I really feel that it's a partnership with your child, to work with them, because you can learn as much from your child as they can learn from you. And I would just say that I agree. I think it's a huge privilege to be a parent, and not everybody can be a parent or wants to be a parent, but we all have a role with children and young people to learn from them and pass on what we can with them, to have a shared dialogue together, really.
Can I also say that I recognise that it's also about men in the age of Trump, and they also face, they haven't had a movement that's come along and expanded the definition of what you can be as a man. And the minute that movement turns up, I will support it. I don't think as a woman I'm in the place to begin one, but the only sort of activism movement that men have is one that actually narrows the definition in a really horrible way. And I have two younger brothers, and they're sort of both quite non-conformist type people, and I see the struggles that they face, and I'm waiting for that to happen, where someone comes along and says, actually, no, we are under this really strict sort of definition of what is acceptable for a man to do and behave and be, and that needs to change. I would really like that to change.
And in my view, that movement is feminism, because to me, as a feminist parent, you know, nobody will tell my boy that boys don't cry. Nobody will tell my boy that he has to be a specific type of boy. Nobody will say, be a man, man up. Nobody will tell my boy that he has to wear a mask in order to be this toxic masculinity culture that we say that men have to be. I'm very lucky that my husband was raised all by women and some very formidable aunties, and has bucked the gender stereotypes that really narrow, as you were saying, that narrow the choices of men. And so he has said to me many times, you know, he's been a stay-at-home dad for big chunks of our children's lives, and we've talked about how many of his friends never get that opportunity to be stay-at-home dads. You know, it's just not an option for them, you know. And he told me once about how when our little boy was first born, he had to go back to work 2 weeks later, and he had to pull over the car because he was crying. It took him 3 years to tell me that he was so gutted to leave his brand new baby, and he said, because I just loved him so much, I didn't want to leave him. And I thought, how often do we hear that from men, how hard it is to have to walk out the door, you know, and they are given these very narrow roles. And to me, that's what feminism is. It's saying that the love of a father is that of the love of a mother, and, you know, you don't have to be this certain type of father. You don't have to be hands off, or you're not babysitting when you look after your children. Oh my gosh, that one drives me mad. You are a parent. But, you know, to me, that's what feminism is. Patriarchy hurts men as well. So we fight together, men and women together, to make it better for all of us and for our children. I want my boys to grow up not ever feeling that they can't do something, because, you know, ever feeling that they can't express their emotions or show love or be affectionate with other boys as friends. And it's such a, you know, I really worry about that as the mother of boys, and I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I do know that I have a heap of people that I can go to and talk to about how together we can make it easier for young boys and girls.
Okay, we have time for a couple of more questions.
Do you consider that Melania Trump will have a legacy at the end of 4 years?
Not at all.
So the question was, do you consider that Melania Trump will have a legacy at the end of 4 years?
I'm waiting for Melania to write her memoir. She'll know things. I mean, it would be a bestseller, wouldn't it?
I bet she thought he'd be dead by now. Thought she'd be going, how much longer is this asshole going to live? I'm sorry for using I just, ugh.
Will she just wait for Michelle to write, Obama to write her biography and then just lift the best
Copy
bits?
it.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Feel sorry for him.
The youngest Trump looking
Little
pretty
barren
miserable.
Trump, yeah. He looks barren.
Really to speak to your point, Laura, about connection, finding connection. It's something that I struggle with, particularly, in the wake of the American election and in the build-up to the New Zealand election, that I feel so alienated from so many people. And it's partly because I, read comment threads on...
Don't. It's the biggest advice I can get. Yeah, don't read them.
To try and reconcile the fact that we're in this room and we're clapping and agreeing, but there are all of these people out there that obviously feel different.
Emily said something really interesting when we were having our little chat around the table about keeping yourself safe. And I wonder if you would mind just recapping that. It really hit me.
I can see how much you're feeling this right now. Yeah, to those who couldn't hear, the comment was around feeling alienated and isolated by comments and commentary online that are so away from... Yeah. To talk for 1 second about comments, because I feel really strongly about comments, and then on to self-care. Comments on stuff and the New Zealand Herald are terrible, and there is something actually as a consumer that you can do about that. So I work in the media. I'm the editor of the Spin-Off Parents, but I often get approached around doing pieces, being interviewed or things like that for stuff. And what I tell anybody is, if a stuff journalist rings you and asks you to do an interview or you're doing something, you say to them, I'll only do it if you turn comments off. I will only do it if you moderate your Facebook page. And if I see one comment that is abusive, I will be pulling that story. Because they have a responsibility as media to people that they don't interview people and then put their story up them and subject them to hundreds of abusive, terrible comments. I know people who have got to the point of attempting suicide over the comments on stuff, because they did a story that they thought was just a standard story and instead got hundreds and hundreds of comments saying, you are a shit mum, you are crap, all this stuff. I've had people who've lost children who've then had the comment section talk about whether they were to blame for their dead children. This is ethically disgusting, and we have to hold our media to account for it. And I say that as a member of the media. So I was a columnist in the Herald for a long time. I no longer am, but I said to them, every time they ran my column, no comments. You put it on Facebook, you moderate, or I'm out of here. And I know that there's a level of privilege in being able to say that because I had other work I could do. But we have to, as consumers, writers, anybody who engages with the media, say, I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with you hanging people out to dry in your comment sections, and I'm not okay with you encouraging homophobia, racism, transphobia in your comment sections. So that's just on my high horse about comments. But in terms of self-care, I really feel you. I moderate some very big spaces. My personal page is at almost 30,000 and it's very difficult. And my view is that, the controversial view, that having a bubble is great. It's actually everybody, there is this big group of people who say, you're liberal left bubble, blah, blah, blah. They're the type of people who harass anybody who has a public profile. People like Sean Plunkett who come out and say, these people don't engage with anybody else. Well, I engage with Sean Plunkett and he told me to go fuck myself. So should I be talking to him when I was trying to have when I was conversing with other people and he came in and said that. No, it's okay to block and delete and ban people, and it's okay to say, I'm not going to be subjected to abuse. I don't invite people into my house and let them walk in and say horrible things to me. They don't get to do that online either. And I want all the people who come to my website or my page or my section to feel safe and feel like they can express an opinion without somebody calling them a slut or a whore. You know, that is the right of women online to be able to engage with each other. So my view on safety is get rid of jerks. I have a ban policy of no notice. You say anything shitty to me and it's like, see ya. I didn't create this platform to be your entertainment if you're going to come and abuse me. In terms of comments on stuff, you can get apps that hide all the comments, which, you know, is good, but much better is an ad blocker because then they don't make any money. So, and it sounds harsh, but you need to say to media, until you give me the media that is a media that is respectful and ethical, I won't support you. You know, so in terms of that type of thing, that I really encourage that. In terms of the alienation and isolation, be with your people. I have days where I sit there and think, the Australian plebiscite has been particularly difficult for me. When I see people say that queer people are terrible parents and a scum, and I sit there and go, I'm a good mum. I go to my friends and we sit together with our children and we drink cider and we watch our beautiful kids running around. And we say to each other, you're a good mum. Just because you're married to a woman, you know, but you have to find your people and sit with them in that beauty of the life that you've created and build yourself up with those people who cherish and prioritise love and kindness above everything else. And you have to say to all those other people who want to inject that hatred, just, yeah. Oh, stop it. But yeah, it's hard, and I just want to send you love because I felt that and it's hard, but find your people.
Okay, I
Sorry,
think
I talk too long once I start.
I think that's probably a really good place to leave this. I know that there'll be so many more things to say and to talk about, but I really want to thank our panellists for their wisdom, for their bravery, for coming and sharing their thoughts and their passions and their emotions with us. And thank you, audience, for being so involved with this incredibly important topic. So thank you all so much. Just a reminder that this will be a podcast and you can go and find it on the Page and Blackmore's Nelson Arts Festival page. And thank you so much to the Arts Festival, Page and Blackmore's. Thank you, panels.
Month? It'll be there in 1 month. All the podcasts will be there in 1 month.